Howdy, folks. Welcome back or welcome aboard. You are listening to the Doc Owen Show. We are extremely proud to have you and glad you are here. I think we've got a whiz-bang show for you tonight. The first thing I need to tell you is if you tuned in to last week's show and you thought that you had heard all of that before, you would be absolutely correct. And I apologize. We just had an extremely challenging technical week, and what happened, so we couldn't get it together enough to do a live broadcast, so we called upon one that was one of the most popular out of our recent broadcasts, and that was a discussion with Nico about sanctuary cities and a hot topic. So my apologies if it was repetitive to you. If you didn't know that it was repetitive, ignore the last announcement.
All right.
This one is not that. As you can tell, I am joined in the Hilltop Studios by...
I'm a surefire.
And...
Uncle Bocce.
Uncle Bocce is back. Mm-hmm. So, and since we air the way that we do, nobody knew he was gone because he was on every week.
That's right.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you know, and we don't post that sort of thing on Facebook. We are all over social media as Doc Owen Show. DOCOWENSHOW. Primarily Facebook, Twitter, a little bit of Instagram, and a bunch of other sites that link to that. But those are our drivers. Please go out there. The best thing to do is to follow us on Twitter. I will explain that to you in a bit. But and everywhere we are the same. Doc Owen Show, DOCOWENSHOW. When we launched this thing, coming up on 5 years ago, we're about to finish up our fourth year. So we just went out there and reserved Doc Owen Show all across every social thing that we could possibly find. And there were like 320 some odd at the time. There's probably 1,000 by now.
Yep.
You know, different social media sites. And every time we find one that we think is good, guess what we do? We Doc Owen Show stamp that sucker. All right.
There you go.
We have a blog that we are growing, and Uncle Bocce in his time off apparently has become king of the blog because he's been very active and is chatting up some technical questions before the show to figure out how to get more active. So it's going to be rocking and rolling. And you'll never this one was hard. We spent numerous hours, the three of us, agonizing, ordering beer, throwing pizza to come up with the name for the blog. And in the net result, our dog barked out DocOwenShow.com. So that's what that's what it became. We also have free apps on both the Apple and the Android platform. Doc Owen Show. You can go and look for in your respective store, look for it, download the free app. You'll not only get to hear the show live, but you can listen to it as a podcast, and you get access to 4 years worth of shows. I mean, we've got everything out there in the entire library. And that's what I was going to go back and tell you about Twitter. If you're a follower on Twitter, you will get a tweet the minute we kick off the broadcast, and you can click on your smartphone device wherever you are in the world and hear the Doc Owen Show live. So that's by far the best connection that we've got going is the Twitter thing. Mm-hmm. We always start this show in a very traditional manner, and that is that Ms. Surefire gives us a moment of inspiration. Uncle Bocce gives us a day, an event for this or two maybe, depending on how significant they are for this day in history. And then I close that little segment out with a leadership quote of some sort. So, Ms. Surefire, take it away.
And tonight's quote comes from brainyquote.com. That's BRANY quote.com. And tonight's quote comes from a man that most people should recognize by name, Nelson Mandela.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that guy.
Yeah.
He's South African anti-apartheid revolutionary
Yeah.
who eventually became president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999.
Okay.
And his quote is,
After he became president after a long term in prison.
yes. Well, I didn't really want to mention that, but yeah, that's
Well,
true. Yeah.
well,
poor man.
Right.
Yeah. He also had several wives.
He did? Mm-hmm. At the same time?
No,
One
that
after
would
the
be
other.
bigotry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So his quote was, "It seems impossible until it is done." It being whatever you can imagine.
I like it.
That's true.
It seems impossible until it is done.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Perfect.
That's right.
Yep. And once it's done, you've proven it that it's possible.
That's right. And
There
on
you
to
go.
the next challenge.
I got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Uncle Bocce,
Yes.
what happened, man? Tell us something.
Hey, guys. Glad to be back. Some of you out there who are our listeners won't even have an inkling of an idea of what happened on this day in 1974.
Huh.
Okay?
Yep.
That was the day that Congress started its impeachment process for Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, those of you who don't understand the Watergate scandal and all of that, what would be interesting if somebody could let us know who the Congress was at that time. But fear not, because next week we're going to start a new series on presidents. Okay?
Okay.
And we will get to this, and you will learn everything you need to know about each of the presidents. So, just wanted to mention that. But that was all that really happened
That's
today.
it?
That's it.
I wasn't expecting to go on this early. Okay. So I have a leadership quote from a little book called 250 Optimistic Quotes for Achieving the Extraordinary. And it's from the Optimist Club, of course.
Of course.
This one is in a section on decisiveness. And it is from a fellow by the name of Mark Twain. I can teach anybody how to get what they want out of life. The problem is that I can't find anyone who can tell me what they want.
Good one.
Okay.
Good one.
It is a good one. You know, you can't get there if you don't have a plan, if you don't know what your goal is.
That's right.
We've got a very good, brief but good, solid interview this week with a fellow by the name of John Whitehead, who is the author of a book that we did a kind of a preamble to the book. We discussed the book like a book review, not last week, but the week before. And so if you go back, not to last week's show, but the show before that, you'll get an entire or a good half of more of the podcast is dedicated to the name of the book is Battlefield America. And so this is the author of that book. I highly recommend A, the book, B, the podcast, and C, the upcoming interview.
Absolutely.
And then you'll have the entire picture of you'll have an entire picture of the way a lot of see the United States.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
and it's the best thing about the book is, and I'll tell you before we get into it, the best thing about the book is it is highly annotated. In other words, there are footnotes, there are references, there are facts, figures, dates, information, places, things. It's not somebody just kind of posting an opinion. It's somebody that has done their homework and done their research, and he's been living this sort of environment for quite some time. But I don't want to steal John's thunder. It's a good interview. So hang on for that. Before we go there, Uncle Bocce is going once again to be a real pain and discuss some history. Uncle Bocce, you're on.
Thank you. Hello, everyone out there listening in our listening audience. I'm glad to be back. Had a great vacation. Wonderful time. So, yes, we're going to talk a little bit more about
How come we don't go on vacation?
Paine.
We do.
Oh, okay.
You do.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do.
But we work.
I'm trying to limit that.
We're going to finish our discussion about Thomas Paine, who, to my surprise, is actually more of a patriot, even though he was new to America, and he was a little bit ahead of his time when he
was
wrote.
way ahead of his time.
Yeah,
He was a young guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And he wrote Common Sense,
Right.
which George Washington thought was so great that he made sure that every one of his soldiers read this book.
And I think it should be required reading till this day.
It really should be. It really should be. So it was a rallying call. So some of the things that Paine talked about is, since he was ahead of his time, he was already thinking about what form of government an independent United States would be, or the colonies, independent colonies should
Right.
be. And his idea, of course, was representative democracy.
Right.
Okay, and which goes along with a lot of the great writers that preceded him.
Right.
Now, Paine explains the current time is a good time to break with Britain, to break free of Britain. That was one of his other tenets, is that he thought now was the time. He focused on the present size of the colonies and their current capabilities.
Right.
And in his mind, he felt that if we didn't, it was one of those things where if we don't do it now, we may never have another chance to do it.
Right.
Because the country had, or the colonies had come together because of all the things that Britain was trying to do to them.
Right.
So he thought this was the opportune time. And he even did a study of the British Navy.
Yeah.
And he proposed that that Americans could build a navy as big as and as great as the British. This is how positive he was thinking.
Yeah, which is an unbelievable thought
Yeah,
at that time.
of course, absolutely.
Nobody would dare challenge the power of the seas.
And he felt that was a way of ensuring America's security and prosperity in trade.
Right.
He felt that we really needed that. He also argues that America is sufficiently small, like I was saying,
Right.
to be united now.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And if time were to elapse, who knows what would happen? You know, this was the time. The feeling of unity was there. Paine adds that if the Americans revolt now, they can use the vast, unexplored areas west to help pay for
Right.
the war that they should be coming to.
To use it, all the resources that we had.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So he said that the colonies of Britain, there were a number of things that America lacked. One, they lacked respectability because they were subject to the King of England. They are seen simply as rebels. Okay.
What's so wrong with that?
Well, it depends on who's looking.
Okay.
You know, and that we cannot form alliances with other countries because we're under the British. So, in order to prosper
Okay.
in the long term, the colonies needed to be independent.
Right. Right.
He says that the declaration, by declaring independence, America would be able to help other countries in the struggle for freedom. But they can only do that if they were themselves independent.
Right.
For those reasons, Paine says it is imperative and urgent that the colonies declare independence now.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Just as a point of reference for everybody, because we've been talking about this for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe we've got some new listeners that haven't been following us for that long. Hopefully they'll stay around. Thomas Paine was about how old? First of all, he was from Great Britain. I mean, he had just recently come over here from Great Britain, and he had, worked over there.
Right.
And
he
then,
met Ben Franklin.
And he met Ben Franklin, and Ben recruited him to the States.
That's correct.
Okay. but he was like in his late 30s or his 30s. I mean,
Yeah, somewhere
he
in
was
there.
really not old at all.
No, he wasn't.
Okay.
And the fact that he came in 1974 and we declared our independence in 1776, his book
that would make him 200 years out of sync.
Yeah, exactly. Really, it was.
You said,
okay.
You said
so,
he came in 1974.
Did I say that?
Yeah, that's why I said he was 200 years out of sync.
And I just went right along. Boy, I tell you,
it's okay.
I am so gullible.
That's okay. You have to talk, and I get to poke fun.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so here are some of the themes that he was trying to get across from the outset. Paine makes it clear that he is not particularly fond of government. Right. As many writers before him were. He just didn't think that government was a good thing.
Right.
Because it was derived, well, anyway. Yeah. So
he was an anti-government guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And he brought up the idea of the natural state of man, which, again, a lot of intelligent writers brought up many years before he did. So this guy was very well versed. He said that the nature of man is to live without government.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So government's existence is justified only to the extent that it alleviates problems that would be created by this natural anarchic way of life. And there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that, as we will see and we will develop as time goes on.
Well, there's truth to that, but as we've discussed before, it is strictly dependent on everyone having a good moral code.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so if a government fails to improve society, or worse, actively causes some of the same troubles that would result from anarchy, it is particularly blameworthy. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah? Does that relate to today or not?
I've heard something like that.
Yeah. Okay. His position on the state of nature, he proceeds by considering an imagined natural state in which man might have first found himself. Okay, and these were things that he used this kind of analysis, which were the same kinds of things that Locke and Hobbes talked about in their writing. Considering what man might have been before society was formed. So such an analysis, what man would have been and what rights he might have had and all of those kinds of things he was considering. His imagined natural state to analyze a political dilemma with a parable, and we talked about that the last time we met, about putting a bunch of people on a deserted island and see what would happen.
Right.
Okay. Furthermore, in discussing monarchy, Paine presumes men to be originally equals, and in doing so, he harkens back to some imagined age again, where he presumes men to have all been equal. Which the monarchy, of course, you're not equal.
That's right.
You're all in different classes and things of that nature.
Correct.
Okay. The inevitability of American independence. He argued that we're going to be independent anyway. It's inevitable that America would become an independent nation. So since he believed that, he felt that, again, now is the time. We need to have established the principle of American independence, and that was the first step. And by convincing his audience that America will be independent someday, it is much easier for Paine to make the case for an immediate and full rebellion. So he backed up his arguments.
No, of course he did.
Okay? The other inevitability was that of British oppression. Well, Britain is being horrible to the colonies now. What in God's green earth would make anyone think that Britain would get better? It was inevitable that they were going to continue their oppression. So he demonstrates this in two ways. First, he points to the history of colonial relations with Britain, especially events surrounding, remember the Stamp Act?
Yes.
And all those other acts.
I remember it quite well.
Second, he attacks the structure of Britain's government, arguing that it was corrupt and unjust.
Did he have any? We need a Thomas Paine today.
We do, absolutely.
He's out there, I think. We just don't know who he is
Yeah,
yet.
I think he is.
Could be Ben Shapiro.
It could be. Or Daniel Horowitz. So, and on America's relationship with the rest of Europe, again, he was saying that unless we're an independent nation, we cannot have good relationships with other European countries. This informs his argument in a number of ways. Paine points out that it would be advantageous for America to form commercial and political ties with these nations. Second, he notes that the current political arrangement of America as being subservient to Britain precludes the colonies from becoming able to independently engage in such alliances.
Right.
And he finally concludes that only if the colonies declare independence will they be able to reap the opportunities offered by alliance with various European nations.
That's a fact, yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
And then he goes into the problems with the monarchy, and as I said, he just thought that it was a horrible institution. He really came down hard on the idea of hereditary monarchy, passing it on to your son and their sons and all that.
I don't know. It's working out real well for North Korea.
Well, yeah, a totally controlled, yes. Of course, that's the only way it can work.
It's right.
And
Ugly after more ugly.
exactly.
Ugly followed by double ugly.
Yeah. So to define some of the terms that Paine used, one is society. And he said that as everything good that comes out of people living and working together, that's what society is. Mm-hmm. Okay? In the state of affairs whereby people collaborate to bring about positive aims. People working together, creating that civil society. Government, he thought, is a force that aims to keep people from acting in accordance with their vices. Which, I broadened the definition of vices to being, the law.
Yeah.
Things like that. That's part of what government is about.
Well,
okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And
within reason.
Yeah, exactly. And on reconciliation, he just thought, this is ridiculous for all these reasons that there's no way that we're going to reconcile with Britain. Look at the history.
Right.
Look at the history. Mm-hmm. You hear that, people?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Look at the history.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Many still felt that loyalty to the monarchy was the way to go.
Well,
there were still a lot of people.
Sure.
And that was common in 1776. The viewpoint Paine wrote about is common sense.
For time immemorial,
to oppose.
People do not like change.
That's right.
That's true.
And of course, I just mentioned the hereditary succession. He was totally against that and blood relations. And usurpation is a term he used. It's the unlawful or unjustified seizure of power to govern.
Yeah.
Okay?
Usurping
Yep. And when we get into our presidents, we're going to find out about the usurpations. Let me tell you.
Yes, we are.
Mm-hmm. And in summary, Paine begins his pamphlet Common Sense with general comments about government. Then he moves on to people have a tendency to confuse government with society, and that's not the way it is. He draws a sharp line, argues that society is always something to strive for, whereas government is just a necessary evil.
Right.
And I think that's a good point to end on. To call it a day. I think I'm out of time anyway. Well, probably went overtime.
You said in summary. I mean, that should be pretty obvious to our listeners.
Yeah.
It's the end of July.
Yeah, well. Okay.
It's hot.
So, folks, you can reach me at Uncle Bachi, UNCLEBACI, at DocOwenShow.com. I promise I will answer every email that you send me.
Fill up his email box.
Fill it up.
Drive it out there.
Thank you, Uncle Bachi.
Good job.
You're very welcome.
We are going to have the conversation with Mr. Whitehead, and then we'll be back and we're going to talk about these future shows and the future, what we're going to do now that I got one question for you about Paine. I mean, he was
the relief factor.
Well, no, several things. Yeah. he wrote a book called Common Sense.
Yes.
Is that still available today?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
In fact, I think it went as much as the third edition.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there were more editions.
But when we
yes.
say a book, I mean, it's more of a pamphlet, isn't it?
Yeah, like 79, 80 pages.
Yeah, I mean that was a big book back then.
Yeah.
I mean that was a lot of writing because and the way they had to put it together and the way they had to set the type and I mean that was a lot. I mean,
It's a big effort.
It was like
yeah, and he
a
sold
huge
thousands and thousands,
Hundreds of
of
120,000 in the first couple months.
And I'm going to make this point again. I'm going to continue to make the point. Without Amazon,
Exactly.
I mean, he had no website to advertise it on.
No
it was
drones.
strictly by word of mouth. No drones to deliver it with. I mean, that is, as we say,
Huge.
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 Okay.
It was huge.
Yep. So people should read that book. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's readily available. I guarantee you there's a Kindle version. I mean, I got hooked on this going through school and reading some of these old guys' stuff, and it because it's a quick read. It's a little hard because of the language sometimes. You know, it sounds stilted, but there's a lot of wisdom in those little pamphlets.
Absolutely.
The Federalist Papers, all the things that we've talked about. So the audience needs to know that, you know, we're not just grabbing the stuff and have the only copy. You don't have to go to the library. You can go out there and get it and put it on your bookshelf and read it very, very quickly and understand where they're coming from. The other
Absolutely.
thing about Paine, he did not sign the Declaration of Independence.
No.
He was not really a person of a lot of power or influence in the United
Politically,
States.
yeah. No, he
Politically.
wasn't, yeah.
I mean, he'd not been here that long.
Nope.
He was just some off-the-cuff young writer who put a book out there that just went, like, everybody went, whoa, this guy's nailed it. Right?
Exactly.
And he did, and he nailed it till this day.
Yes.
Is the point I'm trying to make. It would be a very good book for today's youth if you weren't required to read it in high school, which you probably weren't.
Right.
I think we were, but I don't think it's a requirement anymore. But it should be part of your required reading, just because it is what it says it is. It's common sense. It's logical.
That's right.
And it applies to today. It is perfectly timely to go out there and get it.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that.
Good.
I enjoyed
Good.
Thomas Paine, that whole common sense thing. I always have. The gentleman that's going to be on next is a fellow by the name of John Whitehead. Mr. Whitehead is a lawyer. He runs a thing called the Rutherford Institute. You can find him at Rutherford Institute. I think it's just rutherford.org. They got a great daily broadcast that they put out, a great email that they put out, and it is a very formidable original intent constitutional site. And that's what Rutherford Institute is all about. You'll find out a whole lot more. I would really like to have you go back, not last week, but the week before, and find a show called Battlefield America, the Preamble, because it was a book review of the book that John wrote. And John Whitehead is the author of Battlefield America, and we're about to have him on as soon as we flip the switch. What are you going to say?
It's worth going back and listening to that because it was very well done. Kudos to you,
Which
Doc.
is nice for Bocce to say because him weren't here, so you had to hear it for the first time like anybody else, right?
No, I did listen to it. That's why.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. So that's why I can say that it was very well done.
I appreciate it. That's because I was sitting in Uncle Bocce's chair when I did it.
Yeah.
When he's here, he gets to sit and I have to stand. I can't figure that out. Okay, so let's move on to my conversation with Mr. John Whitehead. Thank you. One of the primary questions that I'd like is, I mean, I've written a book, a work of fiction, but it had to do with politics and the things that are going on in the world. How long did this take you, and how did you live with yourself with all of this? The type of data that you were gathering just wasn't any fun.
Well, it's the same thing I'm doing now. if you go to rutherford.org, I write a weekly commentary, which
Yes,
I
sir.
still analyze issues. And to be honest with you, as I look at the future, I have 22 students studying with me this summer, law students and undergraduates that want to go in the field and fight for freedom. They're so rattled, and they just feel the future looks awful for them.
But I'm an optimistic guy, and I get the feeling, even through the way you had to write this, that you are too.
I'm not optimistic or pessimistic. I'm realistic.
Okay.
I think we can change things, but people are going to have to wake up and get active, especially on the local level. So.
I completely agree with you, and you stated that several times in the book. I liked particularly the part where you got in towards the end, the 10 basic principles. In other words, what has to be done, and you started out with we have to change ourselves.
We have to change the way we think. Yeah,
yes, sir. Change the way we think.
Yeah, so it's,
and speaking of current events, I just saw an email that came across where you were, or the Rutherford Institute. Don't know that it was you personally, but I'm sure it was at least part of the same cadre supporting that naval officer that played taps every evening down in Pennsylvania. Which, as a Navy guy, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal. But that to me, that's the sort of thing you're talking about in the book. In other words, every little instance we have to push back on. We have to make sure that we're trying to push things in the right direction.
Yeah, you can't. These days, with so many laws, and again, 5,000 criminal laws on the books, and the highest prison population in the world. A janitor who his grass was 1 inch too high spent 18 days in jail in Texas a couple of years ago. They don't. There's so many laws that you can get. People say to me, if I've got, if I don't have anything to hide, what I got to worry about? And I say to them, listen, it was like a veteran we helped who had a tomato garden in his yard. He didn't know that was illegal.
Right. Well, and that phrase you just used, I grinned when you said it because that's exactly what my mother used to tell me. And I think growing up, and you and I are relatively close to the same age, I think it was true. But it's no longer true, and that's the challenge that's one of the major challenges that we face.
Yeah, and it's the government. Is like the NSA is downloading 2 billion emails a day. They're sending our emails now over to England. They call it traffic shaping, where now they can evade the Fourth Amendment and look at everything we're doing. Facebook, Google works with the NSA, Amazon.
Oh yeah.
So everything you do and every purchase you make, every home has a threat assessment now. The Department of Homeland Security, they're watching every home. If you get a speeding ticket or whatever, or you own even a legally owned firearm, your threat level goes higher if the police come to your door. So it's a situation that only science fiction writers could have dreamed up years ago.
I think that's very well said. So, what started? You've constantly been a fighter for the Constitution in its original state. In other words, how it was original intent, I guess, is a better phrase.
Yep.
And combined that a little bit with like popular culture. And what sent you down this path? I can tell you when I watched the Boston bombing, the thing that took me aback and so mesmerized me in terms of the television was the just total disbandment of the Constitution. And it was martial law citywide looking for 2 people. And
yes.
Every kindergarten SWAT team was out there participating in the game. And it just really, really, and that your book is about that sort of thing.
Some of the cases we've been involved in, when I first started seeing the cases with how the government treats people, 4 years ago we helped a 26-year-old Marine who had been jogging on a Saturday morning, and he worked in his home. He had a home, just tied to us, and was dealing with coins and stuff, and he didn't have his shirt on. He heard a noise outside, looked outside, the police cars were pulling up around his property. People in plain clothes. It was the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and other groups were running toward his home. He walks to the screen door and says, "What's up?" And they said, "We're concerned about your Facebook post. We've been watching what you're saying on Facebook." And he said, well, what's the concern? He said, would you step out, sir? So he steps outside. And he didn't own a weapon. They couldn't get a search warrant. He owned no weapon at all.
Okay.
They grabbed him, handcuffed him, took him to the police station. Before they slammed him against the fence and cut him badly, he asked for bandages. They put on a prison shirt, he said, which cut into his back. It stuck to the wound.
Right.
And he had a 5-minute examination with a psychiatrist who said the slow pauses, and he's a 9/11 conspirator. He was probably mentally ill. He had a short hearing. They put him in a mental hospital. His mother called every organization. She called me crying, said, would somebody help? We filed a lawsuit, got him out in a week. And the court ruled there that there was no reason to keep him there. Then we did our research. 1.5 million people a year disappear in the mental hospitals. They're called civil commitments, or they don't come out.
Still? I mean,
the scary stuff.
That's like stuff we read in the history books. I mean, that's like stuff that went
the
on.
The old Soviet Union. In fact,
yes,
I
sir.
had a former NSA agent who
yes.
told me, he said, John, we're now following the Soviet model. I didn't know what he meant by that. He said, we use the Horde, Homeland Security, all that. He said that's all Soviet terms of the old Soviet government that put people in mental hospitals
right.
for writing poetry. So we've reached a level in this country that if people don't, and I think we've got 10 years maybe.
At best.
It's moving so fast. I mean, if you go to our website, Rutherford.org, you read my book, Battlefield America, you'll see, and I footnote everything. I'm not a conspiracy theorist.
No, sir. This is well researched. I was absolutely, I felt for you when you were putting it together.
Well, Judge Napolitano endorsed the book, and I put his quote on the cover. He said he had trouble sleeping at night after he read it.
Yeah, he was absolutely correct. And the other quote that I like was from Paul Roberts, where he was talking about and that was on the back of the book where Paul Craig Roberts talked about describes the danger posed to liberty and humanity itself. Yeah. By the control impulse of government and technology, and that's
it's technology is driving everything right now.
Yes, sir. Well, and the problem is when you start describing, you go into the fact, and I'll repeat it for you too. Battlefield America is the name of the book, and I know you can't see it on radio, but I'm holding it up for everybody to see. The fact that we have this constitutional thing about not having a standing army on our soil, and yet
that's what George Washington warned against. Yes.
Right, yes, sir. And
we do now, though.
Exactly, it's the local police force. And
what most people don't realize is, again, I did a commentary on our website and did a vodcast where I talk about it. The Pentagon just released a video. It was by a FOIA request. One newspaper got a hold, but it's by 2030 they're predicting they're going to impose martial law in America because of economic breakdown.
Right.
Dissatisfaction. So, and that's a scary video you're watching. They're predicting, in 13 years, this country's going to start crumbling. And I've talked to economists who say, John, the country looks terrible economically. It could collapse. Our infrastructure, bridges, roads, everything, It seems to be collapsing. We're spending all our money overseas.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah,
just like the Roman Empire did. What happened to the Roman Empire?
We're rebuilding countries and neighborhoods that we tore down in the first place.
Yes.
And that's exactly where our
money's
going.
I have returning veterans good men, who say, I saw cash being handed out to people in foreign countries. There's by American soldiers. He said, it's not, no one's accounting for it.
Right.
So they're disillusioned. They come back, and by the way, they're watched by the government. All returning veterans, a program called Operation Vigilant Eagle, they're watching every one of them. Over 200,000 veterans have returned now.
Right.
And they can't even own a weapon.
That's preposterous. It's
because they're afraid. I mean, they're nervous about them.
Everything is
upside
down.
Under Obama administration, they issued that right-wing extremism report where they listed the people that most concerned the government.
Right.
And returning veterans were listed in that list.
I know that. And I mean, it's completely upside down. I mean, I appreciate your efforts. I applaud your efforts to try to turn it around. And trust me, we're on the bandwagon with you. I do it every chance I get. But it's a daunting task. And the alternate media is actually on a faster timeline for that martial law than you are.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the alternate media is, and I try. I don't want to tell you that I ignore it, but I try not to let it creep into my day-to-day actions it's extremely difficult to just completely ignore it altogether. I can't do that.
I see the people we help legally,
Yes,
and
sir.
I can't ignore it. No.
No way that you can. And to give the audience again the name, because I've gone to the website, I've subscribed, donated. I mean, this is a big deal. It's the Rutherford Institute is what is Mr. Whitehead's. I don't want to call it it's your business outlet. It's your
organization.
It's your organization.
Nonprofit. Yeah, people can
Right.
donate. It's Rutherford.org, and the book is Battlefield America: The War on the American People.
And it is absolutely, it's a page turner. It's fabulous. The guy, I can't tell you how much homework he's done. The only thing that really did bother me about the book, there were too many mentions of Texas. I kind of thought we were a little different and a little above some of this, but dad burn it, every time I turned around,
It's a national problem. It's in every state now.
Yeah. Well, you knew I was saying that tongue in cheek. I mean, the way we look at it in Texas is if it can happen here, then it's obviously much worse everywhere else.
Yeah, you're right about that.
And that's kind of the point I would make, that it's even gotten into our culture down here, which is supposed to be above all that kind of stuff. I personally noticed the challenge in terms of dealing with the police force. We live in San Antonio, and San Antonio is referred to as Military City, USA. We have more retired vets here than anywhere else in the country. In terms of a metropolitan area. As a state, Florida's number one. But the point is, we get plenty of opportunity, and I take everyone to walk up to anybody I see in uniform, including the police, and thank them for their service. And and to me, that's something that anybody out there that's listening to us can do, and that is one way I see we might have a chance of, I don't know about turning it around, but at least getting a little more of a fair
get to know
shake.
your local police. Get to know your local city council members. Go to city council meetings.
Right. Whether you like their politics or not, you still need to be involved.
Exactly. You need to participate. Like I say, the Constitution starts with 3 words: we the people, we are the government. Those people that we call the government are not. They're our representatives. We're the bosses, folks.
And unfortunately, historically, voting goes up for the president and down for local elections, which is exactly upside down from
what you don't want.
Well, it's what you don't want, and you're
Washington D.C. I've sued in and out there for 40 years. It's a very corrupt institution.
I started noticing back in the '60s, sir. So I'm right with you on that. We are up against our allotted timeline, and I really do appreciate your time, John.
Thank you, sir.
I'd love to do it again, but I'll keep pumping the book out there. And as a matter of fact, I've given a couple of local presentations, and I carry it with me and quote from it. To me,
thank you, sir. Thank you. Getting the word out there.
It is a major issue. You have done a fabulous job.
Thank you, sir.
John Whitehead, Battlefield America. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
God bless. One of my great delights in doing those interviews is Uncle Bocce's reaction, because we do the interviews offline, and as the person I'm interviewing or carrying on a conversation with has time, so it's general, it's not at showtime, etc. Just because we want to make sure we have a good phone connection. So Uncle Bocce is usually hearing the interview for the first time at the same time you are, which tells me that what is probably the audience reaction to the conversation, right?
Yeah, I'm going to have to take a handful of Benadryl tonight to sleep. I mean, Napolitano was right. I can.
Yeah,
that's powerful.
It's a really powerful book,
and we need to be reminded of it.
It's very intriguing, and we do need to be reminded of it. And Mr. Whitehead is spot on with what's going on and what we can do about it. So we would be doing him and the country a service to support it. Before we go any further, I have an announcement that I have to make that my other two cohorts on the show are not aware of. But I made a very major decision today when it has to do with the Doc Owen show. And so in order to get the appropriate audience reaction, I withheld this information from both Ima and Uncle Bocce until right now. We are moving the show. We're no longer going to be in the Hilltop Studios. We are moving is within the next 6 months to Michigan. I want to vote for Kid Rock. And
I knew there had to be a punchline.
I can't do that unless I'm in legally, unless I'm in Michigan. So I'm going to take up residence in Michigan just so I can support Kid Rock.
Seriously?
No. But I am. I'm not serious about the move, but I am serious about supporting Kid Rock. And I made the comparison the other night when it was first starting to come up, et cetera, that, Sonny Bono was a congressman from California of Sonny and Cher fame. I mean, there's absolutely nothing against it. And I've seen a couple of interviews that he's done, and this young man is spot on. He's got he's a solid citizen. And, he's a pop culture lifestyle kind of guy, but don't underestimate what that can do. It's not. He's not doing this as a promotion for his career. He's doing it because of his heartfelt desire to make America great again.
Wow.
Yeah, it's gonna be real interesting.
That's
because
amazing.
He's Kid Rock, he'll get a lot of exposure. So
Yeah.
I just thought I would put that out there.
Well, thank you.
Go, kid. If we can do anything for you, you give us a call and let us know. Uncle Bocce touched on something that I would like to talk a little bit more in depth about, because I want you to know what our plans are. We just don't go off helter-skelter willy-nilly and get together late on a Thursday evening to do a radio show. These things they're planned. I won't tell you that we sit around for days at a time and have conferences like you do in the corporate world, but we do have conversations and ongoing and decide some things, right? And one of the things that Bocce mentioned was, I felt like it would be valuable not only to the audience, but have a little personal interest in it as well, to go back and study the presidents of the United States in sequence, starting with Big George Washington, right?
Exactly.
And we're going to work our way all the way up to as far as we can get, which would be the present time. And I think that since it's a 4-year gig, we should be able to finish it with Trump still in office. That may be a stretch for some people to imagine, but I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do is we're going to take like 2 weeks on each president, right? And the first week is going to be the campaign. We know the names of the presidents. Very few of us know the names of the person that lost.
Right.
Unless they came back to win after that, and then we still only know him as the president. So we're going to find out who the losers were, and we're going to find out what parties were in charge, whether the Democrats won or the Republicans won. And then what I really want to know is what happened after the election. How did the elected president do? How did he? What did he do for this country? Good or bad?
Exactly.
Right. And what was he faced with? So what I'm trying to do is to tie together the fact that, we know what's going on today. We may or may not have been paying much attention to what went on when Obama got elected and reelected. Or it just depends on how old you are and when you started paying attention to all of this. And sometimes those are not exactly the same. We got people 75 years old that have only been paying attention for the last 5 years. And we got people that are 20 that have been engaged since they were 13, 14. So, I want to know just what I said, the sequence of the presidents who lost. Did they have a Congress that was all Republican like we have now? Was it a trifecta? We had the Senate, we had the House, we had the presidency. Those are all Republicans. Well, what happens when it's the opposition? And also, how have some of the winning presidents in history been met with resistance or support or that sort of thing? You know what I'm saying? In other words, when Bill Clinton won, what happened?
Yeah.
And who ran against Clinton? Yeah. And what was the race up to the White House about? We're going to go through that in 1 week, and then the next week we'll talk about the actual presidency. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's kind of like a nuanced way of getting history across to our audience, in a sense, because we'll see history through the president's eyes.
Well, because today we're living one phase of that history.
Yes.
Called President number 45. Right? Is he 45?
Yes, he is.
Okay. So
not his age, his number. Yeah.
Oh no, I know that. But you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we're living part of it right now. Well, how does this compare with the previous 44?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we see stuff in the media. We see things like, I saw something the other day where Obama drove us further into debt, almost twice as much debt as a country in his singular 8 years in the White House than all 43 of his predecessors.
Absolutely. You're absolutely
combined.
right on that.
Total them all up. As bad as they were, he outdid them in one 8-year period.
And look what we got for all that money.
Donald Trump. Oh, no. That wasn't the question. Sorry. I was anticipating what you were going to ask.
Okay.
And Trump wrote a check for it, and we all lived
we go.
Happily ever after.
Yeah.
But that's the sort of thing we need to know. And so that our young people today can know that what's going on today may or may not be unique.
Exactly.
I don't think it is.
That's exactly.
I think historically we're going to find that every time a Republican won, the Democrats started whining and raising Cain and doing various and sundry things, to act out. And I think when the Democrats won, the Republicans licked their wounds and got ready, hunkered down, did their business, acted like the typical conservatives that they were, and waited their turn to take the helm and try to straighten things out. I don't know that to be true, but my approximately 50 years of paying attention to all of this tells me that it's been true for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. But I want to know what went on before that. So Uncle Bocce and I are going to both be doing a little bit of history of study and, figure out what happens. We will start next week with George the Washington, right? Which was like a unanimous choice.
Of course.
I mean, that's
right.
That was a no-brainer. I mean, he won the war, give the guy the presidency. So if that's okay with everybody. If you don't like that idea, then you're more than welcome to write Uncle Bocce because it's all his. If you do like that idea, it was solely I'm a surefires and call and congratulate her. So
that's not true either.
But you can still call her.
Neither one of those statements are true. We are very glad to have you. I hope you like what you hear coming up. It's going to be a little change of pace. We're going to start right where we left off, so it's not too much of a shock to you to be yanked out of the Revolutionary War and plopped down in 1944. So we will walk you through and bring you up to date over a course of the next X number of weeks.
Excellent.
Right? I don't know how many those are, but you can go out and figure it out. Well, if we do 2 weeks on each one, it's 90 weeks.
It's going to be a challenge.
That's going to be a real challenge.
It's going to be a challenge.
Keeping everybody's attention is going to be a challenge for that.
Yeah. Some presidents only deserve about 5 minutes anyway. So.
That's true. That's very true.
We may run into that.
Yes.
We may not be able to get a whole show out of it. Okay. So anyway. Front row. Time to go. You have been listening to the Doc Owen Show. Thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it. Now go out there this week and take care. Pay attention, and God bless.
Bye-bye, folks. God bless.